Travis, let's stick with non-gov, but add your lens and the things that you're seeing and engaging in the discussions that you're having with those chairs.
Sure. So I often get called in for one of two things, either shareholder engagement or some kind of crisis management, fiduciary duty type thing, right? I'm the lawyer. So on shareholder engagement, the rules of the game have just really dramatically changed, I think, over definitely the last 5 years, but really just since the new Trump administration has come in, because Chair Atkins and the SEC has just taken some of the gloves off for companies that they previously, had to fight with one arm tied behind their back is one way we say it, if I'm going to mix all the metaphors. So that is things like the SEC is no longer allowing investors with less than 5 million in shares to use their online Edgar system to blast out communiques to support people. Exxon was able to get an auto voting feature for retail investors to vote with board recommendations. The SEC abandoned their role as referee over whether companies can reject 14A8 stockholder proposals. Some of these things were helpful. Some of them are a little bit harmful to shareholder engagement. A great example of that is that the SEC revised guidance that made 5% shareholders more cautious about engaging with companies for fear of losing their passive investor status. And so we have had to pivot the way that we communicate with some of these institutional investors to elicit feedback from them in a more, what do you think about this hypothetical, or what are your general policies, as opposed to getting direct feedback on that individual company. The proxy advisors themselves have been getting pummeled significantly, both at the federal level and state by state. Consumer Defense is this organization that's basically put together a model statute to take what Texas did, improve upon it, and make it so that the business model of proxy advisors just doesn't work as it currently does. We'll see where that goes. Large investors like JP Morgan and others have announced that they're abandoning ISS and Glass Lewis in favor of either internal or AI voting models or direct investor voting. Glass Lewis has announced that they're going to stop their single benchmark recommendation starting in 2027. So they're going to be issuing individual cards that you can kind of choose your own adventure on if you are an investor, which sounds like a great idea until your state AG comes and claims that you chose that card yourself and that was a problem under their view of sustainability or ESG. And so we're seeing people starting to gear up for that litigation. Then there's the back and forth between Nevada and Texas and Delaware. Should we move out of Delaware, or should we move to Delaware from other jurisdictions? And all of this just goes back to a fundamental theme of activism is getting more and more aggressive, and it's more and more successful than it was previously. In the financial crisis, coming out of that's when activism really started. And now it is a very professionalized, very large industry to drive effectively event-driven economic stock price movements. And to what Heather was saying before, because of board composition being something that is so easy for the activists to attack, because of total stock return being something that's so easy to select among a peer group who it is that you want to announce that you are doing a campaign and then sell stock later once you've gotten what you want, or really actually try to drive change. The nom-gov committees are working, I think, overtime in order to make sure that they have the structural defenses that they need to protect themselves. The technology on that changes every year. It's not the same set of advance notice bylaws that we used 2 years ago. Director education on these things Claudia, myself, and others are getting called to go through tabletop exercises with these boards to talk about, okay, what do you do? People have break glass plans that get updated on a fairly regular basis to say, how would we respond to this type of an approach? How would we respond to that type of approach? And I'll just say, in the last maybe 4 months, something in the water changed with M&A, where there are a lot more casual pass outreaches by competitors to consolidate. We're seeing that if you look in oilfield services, there has been a ton of activity. And it is only, once one person announces, then other people do. If you look in, obviously, technology, particularly in the AI space, but also in hardware, these reverse acqui-hires and other types of transaction structures have become much more attractive and permissible under the current administration. And that has dramatically led to, I don't want to say announced deals, but activity where people are trying to come to an agreed upon valuation. And directors that are sitting on multiple boards are saying, hey, we're getting a call over here on this board, so I need to make sure that my board at another company, obviously not direct competitors, but in a different industry, is prepared for that kind of outreach. The last thing I'll say on these kind of event-driven, is my board ready conversations, is the crisis management. And you often have this playbook for activism. You also have the playbook for crisis management. Who do you call if a pipeline explodes, or a refinery has a fire, or God forbid there's something that leads from fallout from the current war in Iran and related hostilities? If you have assets over there or otherwise, what do you actually do? That's something that people are finally dusting off some of the materials that they prepared 5-10 years ago and haven't really paid that much attention to.
Hey, Travis, could you peel back a little bit? You talked about tabletop exercises, but one of the questions came in is, what role are outside advisors playing in helping companies strengthen defenses, whether it's tabletop exercises or something else?
Sure.
And Claudia, if you want to jump in here too, since Travis pulled you into that conversation, feel free.
Yeah. So we kind of divide it into a few things, but an easy way to think of it is preparation and then response, right? So in preparation, you want to put together organizational documents, actual plans, lists of people, your phone trees. You have to actually educate the directors themselves on what they do, what they say. We were mentioning a second about early, or somebody in the chat said emerging directors. They may not be as experienced in those types of situations. And part of that onboarding process is getting them to understand what is actually in these plans, what is their role when something happens. Activists doing direct outreach to directors, or better yet, the real expectation, I think, at this point from the sophisticated activists is that they're going to get to speak to a director. 10 years ago, they spoke to the CEO. You were not allowed to talk to anybody else. Don't even go there. Now there are sufficiently educated directors on most boards who could have that conversation. And if there aren't, people call Heather and say, hey, maybe we should talk about whether we could get somebody with M&A or activism experience on the board who can help out with these things. The tabletop exercises are very good, both for training and to flush out who on the board might need additional assistance or might not yet have the right instincts on how to respond to certain things. And then you can spend additional time with them afterwards. I'll piggyback on something that Heather said. The board evaluation process, that is becoming another means of kind of supporting these preventative or preparative activities. because of the fact that directors can tell people on the NomGov committee, or really what they typically do is they're going to tell an external advisor because they'll feel more comfortable. The conversation's usually privileged if you bring in the law firm, and you can be honest about what your views are without worrying about that getting discovered in a later fiduciary duty lawsuit or even a disclosure lawsuit. Um, that that is a good way to elicit responses on, hey, do we need to make changes or do we need more education? Should we become an NACD full board member board, right? But seriously, getting people to focus on these changes, to focus on these risks, to focus on preparing themselves, and then having your phone tree of, myself, Claudia, and others in those situations.
Great. Claudia, you want to add on anything to that?
That was super. That was superb, Travis. I think there's always the issue now of, is the board fit for purpose? As Heather and Travis were talking about, because it's so easy for an activist to focus in on a long tenured director whose biography may not fit the company's current strategy. So I definitely think that's part of preparation.
Great, thanks. Hey, Travis, you mentioned Texas Stock Exchange and court system, but just superficially, and you want to give a couple minutes on that one? I think that's a big change for boards to be thinking about.
Sure. I will admit I am fully biased. I sit here in Houston. I also am on the committee that drafts the amendments to the Texas Business Organizations Code. So, blame me if you don't like a lot of the things that are going in there. There is a real competition between Delaware on one side, Nevada on the other side, and Texas trying to be the Goldilocks between the two of them. Nevada has moved to a very protective standard where it's hard to win a fiduciary duty lawsuit against a board in Nevada. It is very difficult. But because of that, ISS and Glass Lewis are almost certainly going to recommend to vote against moving out there. In Delaware, they saw a lot of the things that Texas did last year to create a statutory business judgment rule, to create statutory mechanisms to protect boards when they're, engaging in good faith with a controller like Elon Musk or activists or CEOs. Compensation is a great example. Delaware adopted a lot of that. I think Delaware is fighting back. I think Delaware is doing a good job of it as well. I'm really excited to see what they might come out with next year as at the same time. I do think that Texas is going to have some announcements coming that will be even more attractive for directors that are focused on certainty when they make a decision, as opposed to the ability of smaller stockholders to second guess whatever it is they want, whether that's an actual board decision, whether that's a transaction, or more importantly, and as a lawyer, something near and dear to my heart, Caremark. That oversight risk that you have in Delaware is not an identical doctrine in Texas, and so there's less law on it. But at the same time, there's much more deference to the board if you do have a corporate trauma, like that pipeline explosion, like that cybersecurity incident, like an employee event. So D&O insurance providers haven't caught up. So I don't want you to think that you're going to save a bunch of money on your premiums. It's going to take time for more cases to come. The law just changed last year, but I do know we're having a lot of conversations with companies that are moving where the corporation is domiciled. And then also, just to put a plug out there are a lot of companies that are moving their headquarters and operations to Texas, dealing with the employment laws in California, the environmental laws in California, and some of the other regulatory patchworks throughout the United States, you can move your operations to any number of states. Most of those are in the center of the country, but do so and realize that there's a lot more flexibility under these other legal regimes. And what it really means is a lot more certainty, so that when a board makes a decision, the company is actually able to execute on it.